So, in this episode, we're going to be exposing the lies about Antifa. Why does the camera look like that? Holy crap. Oh, YouTube. What are you doing, YouTube? Wow. So, we're going to talk about exposing the lies, the left-wing lies about Antifa. So there was a lot of lies about Antifa that was spread during the Black Lives Matter, the summer of love that right-wing clowns love to talk about all the time. The left wing was not very honest about Antifa and what they were doing and what they were about. And the right wing were also very dishonest about Antifa. People like Tim Pool. If you wanted to know what Antifa was up to, you go watch his channel. Him and that other clown. I forgot the name. There's an Asian guy who his claim to fame is one time getting attacked by Antifa. And he's also connected with Charlie Kirk in some ways, of course. Of course he is, right? What was his name? Comment below if you guys know who I'm talking about. The name of that clown guy. He actually has a book or something, and he posts videos all the time. And his channel is strictly like, look what Antifa did. And he started doing this videos about a trans cult and trans terror group. So we're going to tell you the truth about Antifa that you're not going to hear from any left-wing channel. Almost no left-wing channel is going to tell you the truth about Antifa. In the same way that almost no right-wing channel is going to tell you the truth about their extremists. And let's start off with that topic first of all. In the United States of America, both the American left and the American right are very dishonest about their extremists, right? The right likes to call normie people extremists and communists and socialists, and someone who's a thinking person would say to themselves, if the left is so bad, then why the need to exaggerate to such an extreme? You have a normie person that wants free healthcare just like many other countries have. Why pretend like this person is a communist, right? Shouldn't you be able to demonstrate how crazy they are and evil they are just by talking about the truth about what they do stand for and who they actually are? Like, you have progressive putting for progressive ideas. Why can't you just call them what they are? Like, this is a progressive, and this progressive has these dumb ideas, and here are the dumb ideas. Why do they need to smear them and call them communists? Right? That's evidence right there that the same people online that are telling you about how evil the left is, they don't even believe the stuff that they're saying, right? If they did, they wouldn't need to lie, right? So, right-wing channels, and therefore right-wingers, are either dishonest about right-wing extremism or ignorant. The ignorance is more so on the audience than it is on the influencers. Influencers are mostly aware, not fully, because they are in a bubble still, but they're better aware of right-wing extremism. They just intentionally mislead their audience into thinking that it's the left who's extreme and the right is they're the good side and the real is the rational side, and all that kind of stuff. And the way you present that argument is by constantly showing the worst of the left, right? And then being quiet about the worst of the right, right? So that's going to lead your audience into false perception, thinking that, the left is a real problem and the right is nothing to worry about. And whenever you hear people talking about right-wing extremism, mainstream media, you got Trump Raymond syndrome, right? That's the response. But the same goes for the left, right? And the Antifa conversation is a classic example of that. So I guess let's start by exposing the left wing, the American left wing, and their lies about Antifa. Brian Tyler Cohen is one of the first ones to remind me about how dishonest the left was about Antifa, because he did a video that makes the same, this is how these echo chambers work, the same echo chamber, nonsensical debunking of the right wing's dishonest Antifa claims. And that's the problem with propaganda, one of the many problems, right? There's a lot of dishonesty coming from the right wing about Antifa and left-wing extremism. So simply focusing on the truth is good enough, right? But because of the propaganda incentives, right, you make a lot of money and attention and views from being the most radical that you can think, right? So we're just going to go to the extreme, right, for clicks, right? Because nuance is not so profitable. So what is the nuance that Brian Tyler Cohen was dishonest about? And he's dishonest in the same way that the right wing is dishonest about Social Security. For years and years and years and years, they keep saying Social Security is going to go bankrupt in 10 years, right? They keep getting corrected that it's not Social Security that's going to go bankrupt. It's a trust fund, a specific trust fund or something like that. So it's a limited part of the money that we use for Social Security. But they present it like the whole thing is going to collapse. And then they're corrected. And then they do it again. And then they're corrected. And they do it again. And here we are. It's been probably a decade or more of this nonsense. And they're still saying it. That is the left with Antifa. What is the lie? What is their Social Security is going to go bankrupt in 10 years. The system doesn't work. There's more people taking out than putting into. What's the left-wing equivalent of that when it comes to Antifa? Well, it is that Antifa is just an ideology, right? So when people make claims and they say that Antifa is a terrorist group, or make statements like that, they are lying to you, or they're really ignorant, because it's just an ideology. It's the equivalent of saying that presenting conservatives as a monolith, right, and acting as if they all think the exact same way, not recognizing that conservatism is an ideology, right? So it's not like people are members of conservatism, right? There's people who have that ideology. But here's the problem with that nonsense, which, just like the right-wing lie about Social Security, this has also been debunked many, many times. And yet Brian Tyler Cohen in 2025 is still spreading this nonsense. So here's the reality. Yes, Antifa is an ideology, just like conservatism is an ideology. However, just like conservatism has actual conservative groups, right? So there are actual conservative groups that you can join and be a member of. There are also Antifa groups or cells that you can be a member of or join, right? And when they say it's just an ideology, it's a very dishonest way of completely dismissing any, like, people that are talking about Antifa, that they're a problem and that they're violent and they do this and that. Some are saying they're a terrorist group, and we're going to talk about that a little bit later. Rather than engage in a conversation about those claims and challenging them, and by the way, ironically, the way I'm speaking right now, this is a technique. Part of this, rather, is a technique that propagandists like Charlie Kirk would use to sound very reasonable, right? They point out something that's being said by liberals, and they reference that there's another side to that they're not telling you, right? and they sound very reasonable and whatever it is, but ultimately they're dropping little crumbs and leading you to believe a certain thing. They're trying to manipulate you into a certain direction. That's not what I'm trying to do. I'm just trying to let you know the truth, right? Love it or hate it, this is the reality of Antifa. So if you want to do some research on your own, I'll give you something to look up so that you can know what Antifa really is. There is a group called, and also ask yourself why you wouldn't learn about this from left-wing channels. Extremism is bad, right? Left-wing channels would agree and say this on their channels, that extremism is bad, whether it's left-wing or right-wing. However, if you watch left-wing channels, you'll probably be very informed about right-wing extremist groups and ideology, not so much about left-wing extremist groups and ideology. Like you wouldn't, I'm sure an overwhelming majority of left-wingers who watch left-wing media have no idea that there are Antifa groups, right? Obviously, the more extremist people they know they might be members of, or they're definitely going to be aware of. But for more, just regular people, maybe you're more in politics than other people, so you're watching, Majority Report or whatever it is, Brian Tyler Cohen, right? But even you, being more politically involved, don't know the truth about Antifa because almost no one in left-wing media will tell you. All you'll hear from them is, it's just an ideology, it's an ideology. The right wing is just lying and they're making this up. And like, so if the right wing makes a nonsensical claim, like January 6th, it's all Antifa, right? It's not, those are not MAGA people. That's Antifa pretending to be MAGA, right? The left wing in that moment will jump in and clarify that this is nonsense. There's no evidence to support that. The right wing is just lying. And then somewhere in there they might say, and Antifa is just an ideology. It's so ridiculous. Ha ha ha. Right? So if you're watching that content, you've been brainwashed for years to thinking that Antifa is just an ideology. Right? It is not just an ideology. It can be just an ideology, but there are also Antifa groups. Right? And it would not be surprising for Antifa to do something like, I don't know. They're definitely organized for sure. But I pause when I think about January 6th, because that's not really the kind of stuff that they would do. But since they organize, the idea that they went out and did something, that they planned out and it's a setup of some sort going against fascism, whatever, like that would not be surprising, right? But the devil is in the details. So, Rose City Antifa. Don't take my word for it. Go look up Rose City Antifa. That is not the only Antifa group that there is, but it is a very well known, unless you are in a left-wing bubble and you're not on the extreme side. It's a very well-known Antifa chapter, whatever you want to call it. They will coordinate with other Antifa groups across the country. But again, that's something that you would not know if you're just a normal left-winger watching like a Brian Tyler Cohen, a David Pakman, because these bad faith actors are propagandists just like Tim Pool and Ben Shapiro. The main reason why, in my view, Ben Shapiro and Stephen Crowder and these folks, are so dishonest is because they have to be. I think it would be convenient to look at them as just like more dishonest than the left-wing folks, if you're a left-wing person, of course, but I don't think it's necessarily that. The dishonesty of the right-wing movement and the Republican Party necessitates, if you're going to pander to people that are in that bubble, it necessitates you being pretty dishonest yourself. It's just the nature of the business. If you choose to do left-wing content, you don't have to be as dishonest, right? There's certainly dishonesty in the Democratic Party and on the left and things like that, but not to the level that it is on the right. So I always wonder, in a different universe, one second. In a different universe, if, or maybe even our future, right? Because right now the left is mimicking the right. They see that they're losing, and they see that the right is just so corrupt and just, no values, no morals, just like anything for power. And they're being rewarded for it. So the left is now like, okay, either we're gonna continue, playing the nice guys and losing, or we're gonna have to fight fire with fire. So now they got dark money coming into their channels. Now I'm starting to see this. They're starting to sound a lot like right wingers, right? I look at some of these left-wing channels now. It used to be that the right wing was always the greedy side, right? Very capitalistic. You watch like a Ben Shapiro's a caricature of that. He can't talk for 2 minutes without some kind of a sponsorship, right? This guy is very, very wealthy. He does not need to be so much, basically begging for money in some ways, right? That is just the greed, right? It used to be that the left wing wasn't like that. The left wing, they would take whatever AdSense money they have, and if they have like a Patreon or something like that, and that's good enough for them, right? They didn't have to bombard you with ads and promoting this and this kind of sponsorship and whatever. They were more organic, more with the people. They were funded by their audience members, right? And then you have the right wing funded by billionaires, right? Koch brothers, like Charlie Kirk, for example. A lot of billionaire money flowing through Turning Point USA. They have direct support of the establishment Republican Party, direct support directly from the President of the United States himself. They are full on captured by the elites and the establishment because they have full support. If you are an establishment Republican, then you absolutely love Turning Point USA. You loved Charlie Kirk. And I don't mean love in terms of you actually cared about him, because many of them probably don't, but you recognize the value there, right? On the left, they're on their own. Even somebody like Brian Tara Cohen, as many Democrats as he got on his channel, it was a struggle for him, right? Democrats are not trying to talk to these independent channels, right? On the right, you don't have that. The channels are basically subservient to the party, right? If things get really, really bad, then they get to the point where they have to sort of save face type of thing, like what happened with the Epstein. But not even long, man. A few days of, well, Trump, I don't know, and then it's right back to pro MAGA, whatever. Trump is the greatest president ever, right? That's their thing. But now the left is heading in that direction now, left-wing media. So we could see in the future where the left becomes as corrupt as the right is right now. The Democrats become just vicious like the Republicans. Just it's all about money and donors and whatever, 100 times more than it already is right now. In that world, I think we'd see that these left-wing content creators don't have as much integrity as perhaps you might think, right? Because I don't think that the right-wing folks, some of them, yeah, but I don't think they all just like evil people and they are just naturally that dishonest. They have no choice. How do you, if you're trying to make money from people that like Trump is lying so much. How do you pander to that group without yourself lying a lot? Right? So I don't know necessarily how honest the left-wing media folks are. I see a lot of dishonesty on their end. It's just they don't have to be so overt with the lies and things like that. That being said, Trump is trying to designate Antifa as a terrorist group. So this is one of the reasons why things are as bad as they are in this country, right? Where it's like everyone's lying to you. The left is pretending like it's just an ideology. It's no big deal. It's people that are against fascism. So if you don't like Antifa, clearly you support fascism. I mean, that argument sounds exactly like the kind of dishonest argument you hear coming from the right. You know, I forgot how they use that, but they use the same kind of a mentality. Like maybe the oh, look at that 4GT, man. America, beast, $400,000 car. So probably more than that now. But anyway, and I lost my train of thought. Sorry about that. I really love cars. So I'm not sure where I was, but I know where I was headed, and that is the discussion about whether Antifa is a terrorist group or not. So I guess I was saying the right lies about Antifa because they talk about it. You know, they'll say things are Antifa with no evidence, right? Something happens, oh, it's Antifa, no evidence at all whatsoever, right? And then they treat it like actually it is like some group, like it's just Antifa of America or something like that. And that's how they lie with the truth. There are Antifa groups, but Antifa itself is not an actual group. So if you're talking about Antifa as a group, then you should be talking about a group. Let me get what I'm saying, right? If you're talking about Antifa as a group, you should be talking about an Antifa group, right? So when you say you're going after Antifa, it shouldn't be you're going after Antifa. You should be going after an Antifa group, right? Because when you say you're going after Antifa, that suggests a group. So you should name the group. Antifa itself wouldn't be a group, right? It would actually be an idea. So you see the beauty of it? That's how the left and right can lie to you. The left can point out this dishonesty from the right and then spin it to, oh, it's just an ideology, which whitewashes the terrorist groups that we do have in this country, the left-wing terrorist groups we have in this country. To my left-wing viewers, I know some of them are like, what the hell am I talking about? Bear with me. The left-wing media is whitewashing left-wing terrorism when they try to just hand wave it away by saying it's an ideology. But they couldn't do that without the right-wing lies pretending like Antifa's a group, right? It's not a group, it's an ideology. There are specific groups. If you want to target the groups that are doing bad things, then target the groups that are doing bad things. If you know that Rose City Antifa is doing domestic terrorist attacks in the country, then talk about we need to designate Rose City Antifa as a terrorist group, and we need to go after them hard. Right? Right wing. If you want to go after left wing extremism, I say do the right wing extremism as well. But if you want to be dishonest, right, and lacking in integrity, and you want to just go after one side's extremists, then do it the right way, right? Target specific Antifa groups. Don't lie and mislead people into this idea that Antifa is a group. It's not a group, right? And then left wing, don't pretend like it's just that it's just an ideology. Acknowledge and call out with the same fury that you go after right-wing extremist groups, go after left-wing extremist groups. If you go to the channels of all the major left-wing channels, you will struggle to find any videos at all of them going after and calling out left-wing extremist groups. Now, obviously, they do the hedging that the right-wing propagandists do. If you dig deep within the videos, you'll find statements where they call out left-wing extremism and say all extremism is bad, blah, 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 violence is bad. But ultimately, if you are a left-wing viewer, if I'm a David Pakman viewer, I probably have no idea that Rose City Antifa exists. I have no idea of the terrorism that these groups do, right? Because David Pakman is not going to tell me about it. And think about David Pakman. He's not an extremist at all, right? David Pakman is more of a centrist type guy. And even him is protecting these extremist groups. He doesn't want to go after them, I would think, for profit reasons. He's pandering to a certain group of people who might be sort of soft to Antifa, right? So he doesn't focus on them. He'll tell you all about the right-wing groups. Oh, the right-wing groups this and right-wing that, as he should, but he should have the same fury for the left-wing extremist groups as well. Because by being dishonest like that, that is how the right is able to pull people to their side, right? Because there are people who don't know anything about any of this stuff, right? And maybe they've been watching liberal media talking about right-wing extremism, and they always hear this, like, people on the left and liberals saying, oh, it's only the right does this stuff, the right does this stuff, and it's usually them when there's violence or whatever. Sometimes on the left, but mostly whatever. And then you go watch a Ben Shapiro video, and he or Tim Pool, and he says there's this group called Rose City Antifa, and he shows you their tactics and what they've been doing. Maybe he shows you the trans people there was a trans guy, maybe, I think it was, that was going around and killing people. And Tim Pool and his good friend, that Asian guy, were all over, look at this, the trans terror group, whatever. And you don't know about any of that stuff. So if you go watch a Ben Shapiro video or a Tim Pool video, and they show this to you, and then you think to yourself, why haven't I heard about this before, right? And they feed it into your head that you've been lied to, you've been manipulated, what you've been told is actually a lie, the truth is actually the opposite of that, it's actually the left, that blah, 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 blah. And then they show you the actual evidence. They say, look, this was an actual trans guy, and he was killing people, and CNN didn't talk about it, David Pakman didn't talk about it, and then here's Rose City Antifa. Look at this, they're beating up an old guy. And then you're like, oh shit, what the hell is this, right? And then you have this moment where you just like, you shed all of your previous views, just like, oh, I don't know what's true anymore. I've been lied to, and this is that. And then you become very, very, once bitten, twice shy. Now, everything coming out of liberal media and left-wing media, you're just like so suspicious of. But ironically, the people who just opened your eyes to that, no suspicion whatsoever. So they're able to trick you. So now you start watching their content, and every day it's like, look what the left is doing. Look what Antifa is doing. And then you're like, holy shit, this is insane. I never knew anything about this stuff. And all these years, the left is telling me about right-wing this or whatever. You mean it was all a lie? Right? And now that you're watching them, all you're going to see is reinforcement of the idea that it's the left that's a problem. Look, it's the left. It's always the left. Right? That's how they're able to grow their numbers, through that kind of dishonesty. But that dishonesty is enabled by the left wing being dishonest. Because if I were that person, right, and I'm watching David Pakman, and David Pakman is honest about left wing extremism, then you can't trick me. Right wing can't trick me. How is a right wing going to come to me and say, oh, it's all lies, look at Rose City Antifa? And I'd be like, actually, David Pakman did a whole video calling them out and saying that they're terrorists and blah, 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 blah. So you're lying, right? And then they're not able to suck that person in. But because of the lies and dishonesty in the left-wing media, you kind of give the right-wing layups so that they can take people who are kind of leaning more to the center and pull them over to their side, right? So let's talk about terrorism. If you put your emotions aside and you look at things objectively, you first of all forget about what you think terrorism is and actually look it up and learn what that word means. We can't have a discussion about terrorism if you don't even know what it means. But if you spend the time to actually look up and see what the word means, right? So it is violence in furtherance of some kind of political agenda, right? It's pretty simple. Violence in furtherance of some political agenda. I think many people, when they think about terrorism, they think about the classic example. They think about like a bombing or something, right? Some Al-Qaeda guy come in with a vest with bombs or whatever it is. And they think the word terror is in there, so they have a layman interpretation that it's like you're doing something really, terrorizing, like you're blowing things up, mass something, right? A mass shooting or something like that. That's not the definition, man. That's your feelings. You feel like this is what it is based on your experience, and you're looking at the word and you have a gut instinct about it. But the actual definition is violence in furtherance of a political agenda, right? So now once we understand what the word terrorism means, and then we can reflect on a very, very powerful statement that has been made for a long time now, which is one man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter. One man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter. Many of these countries that we say have terrorists in it, and they certainly do, to many people in those countries, those people are freedom fighters that are defending their countries against American imperialism. America is going there and manipulating their government and dropping bombs and whatever it is we're doing, doing things that are very devastating to those countries. And like any other country, the response is to fight back. But how do you fight back against a far superior force? You have to use things like guerrilla tactics, right? You have to kind of cheat in a way, because you can't fight fair with a force that is not fair. I mean, they're bringing a massive military and you don't have a massive military. So you got to use unconventional warfare. And that's where you get into guerrilla warfare. And then if you start getting organized to some degree, that's where the terror networks come in, right? You want to, if you're doing some kind of a unorthodox, unconventional warfare up against a far superior force, again, it goes from guerrilla warfare to, you want to get organized, you want to raise money, you want to get, manpower together. That requires organization. So that's where the groups come in, but you don't want to be a specific official group that can easily be targeted and dismantled. So you start doing, you have terror cells, right? So Antifa broadly operates with the cell sort of system, right? Rose City Antifa being a bit of an exception, but a lot of these groups or people who identify as Antifa operate using the cell model, the terror cell model, essentially, right? Because they're not just going in the streets, blocking traffic and things like this. They're actually using violence. Not all of them, but like I did a video calling out the Chicago police ambush, where Antifa, seemingly coordinating with Black Lives Matter, ambushed the Chicago police. Right? Got it all on video and all the evidence. Look at the video. Seems to be a coordinated attack, and that's not a surprising thing, because this is the kind of stuff that we see Antifa groups doing. Right? They operate like terror cells, and Antifa groups absolutely do domestic terrorism. But almost no one on the left will admit that, right? They don't want to talk about it. They want to talk about on the right, and the stuff they say is true. There are some serious problems with this kind of stuff on the right, with their militia groups, the pro-gun groups. There's all kinds of wackos out there, in the woods, practicing for war and all this kind of stuff. Yeah, there's some big problems on the right? But the left wing also has their terror groups as well. They're not as violent, typically. The body counts are not as high, typically. For example, I would be surprised of an Antifa bombing, right? And if Antifa did a bombing, it would be like an unoccupied building, right? On the right-wing extremists, those are the ones who would bomb a building with people in it, right? The mass casualty type of things typically come from right-wing extremists, but it's not a competition. Extremism is extremism. We don't care who does it more, right? If your side is doing it and you're not calling it out aggressively with the same level of energy to the other side, then you're a fraud, right? Don't tell me about how bad the right is, right-wing extremism, and you don't have that same energy for left-wing extremism, right? And the enlightened centrists get out of here pretending like it's all the same, right? Both sides have terrorism, and the left does it and the right does it. Everybody does it. It's all the same. It's not all the same. One side is definitely doing it much more than the other. One side is clearly more violent than the other, but that doesn't really matter, right? It doesn't matter, but you've got to acknowledge it, right? Because when you do this, sort of spend a lot of time focusing on who does it worse, then you enable a pathway to ignoring one side, right? It's kind of like extremism is a thing. That's just how it is, right? Everybody has extremists. But you know what? The left. Oh my goodness, the left, right? Like, that's not my thing. My thing is not, while I recognize that the right seems to be worse in terms of the extremism and stuff like that, I don't make it like, okay, so now I'm just going to ignore left-wing extremism. I'm going to focus on one side and not the other, right? I focus on whoever's doing it, whenever they're doing it. When the left had a lot of violence, when the left had a lot of domestic terrorism, I was calling it out and talking about it. Now that the right is heading in that direction, I'm focused on that, right? So the truth of the matter is, Antifa is both and there is domestic happening under groups of people that operate like terror cells. And just like how you wouldn't ignore a normal terror cell just because they're loose groups, right? Like you have different terror cells in America that represent countries in the Middle East, and they're not really organized in a normal traditional way type of thing. It's a loose network of terror cells. So I don't worry about it. No, we worry about it, right? So why are we having a different approach with Antifa? Now, one of the issues with Antifa that's problematic for folks on the left that I do understand and appreciate is that, when you have authoritarianism happening on the right and the current administration, they're going after freedom of speech. You got these guys with masks around putting people in the back of vans and all this craziness. Simply having a conversation is probably not going to get you very far. And at some point, what's happening right now goes too far, and there needs to be some kind of resistance. And the resistance, at some point, talking is not enough. Right? I'm a peaceful person. I don't support war. I don't support violence. But I do recognize, it's like, imagine if, I can't think of an example. I don't know, some other country comes over here and they're attacking us or something, and we're taking out, please guys, don't do it. Don't do it. Please. We want peace. And then they keep attacking us. At some point, obviously it would never work that way, but at some point in time, we're going to have to meet fire with fire. And I think that's one of the problems that left-wing folks have. When you get to that moment, whenever that moment is, who's going to be your army? Right? If you're on the left and you feel like the right wing is attacking you and they're silencing you and they're destroying the country and things are getting violent and whatever it is, who's going to be your army? right? The normie people aren't the ones that are going to want to put their lives at risk in that way, right? So these Antifa groups end up being potentially the left's army to do the dirty work that they don't want to do, right? So I think some on the left may have that dilemma where they may be aware of what's happening with Antifa and they don't support it or whatever, but they're just kind of like, listen, man, if things really get out of control, you know, we're going to need these people who are willing to go out there and fight against the cops and, you know, put their lives in danger. Like, I'm not trying to do that, so maybe I just leave these guys alone and pretend not to see what they're doing. Is that what it is? I don't know. Anyway, this is the Debate Me channel. Debate Me in the comment section below. Click on the like button, subscribe, smash that bell. Be well. Let me charge this phone up before it dies.